closer look at yeast and the different options that you have available. At the grocery store, you can find active dry yeast, rapid or fast-acting yeast, bread machine yeast, and sometimes you might even run across instant yeast. Now, even though there are all different types here that I mentioned, there's really only two different ones to be concerned about. There's active dry yeast and there's everything else, because everything else is instant yeast, whether it says fast acting, rapid rise. This one says highly active. Anything that sounds quick or fast, bread machine yeast or instant yeast, they're all instant yeast. The only one that's really different, even though these look alike and they both come in a strip package, is the one that's called active dry yeast. So this is the type of yeast that most of us are familiar with. It's the kind that you have to proof or to soak before you start your bread recipe. You get your small cup of water, you empty the package of yeast in it, maybe put in a little sugar or a little honey, and you stir it until it's dissolved and let it sit for about 5 or 7 minutes while it bubbles and foams up. Then you mix your bread recipe and add the liquid and the yeast in there separately. That's what this is about. All of these other types are made so that you can just pour them right on top of the flour and the other dry ingredients in your bread recipe. The bread machine yeast and sometimes the instant yeast will have a little bit of vitamin C added to them, and that just is another little boost to help the bread to rise a little bit better. But basically, the real difference between these two types is that the instant yeast or the fast-acting yeast has been dried at a lower temperature than the active dry yeast has. Active dry yeast is dried at a high temperature, which actually kills off a lot of the cells that are inside. Now, in each one of these little packets, there's millions and millions of tiny, tiny little yeast cells. You might see little clumps, but those clumps are made up of lots and lots of little microscopic yeast cells. And a lot of them die in the actual process of forming them. And so it has to be treated differently than these other types do. These have been dried at a lower temperature, and so fewer of the cells die. Now, a friend of mine had said that she always avoided instant yeast because usually we associate the word instant with something that's less healthy, that's more refined. But in this case, it actually has nothing to do with being anything that you would want to avoid. In this case, the instant yeast means that you don't have to do a separate step of dissolving it in water. You can add it right on top of your bread ingredients. It also means that it will work faster in the rising process. It cuts the time about in half. And my favorite part of all is that you only have to let the bread rise one time instead of two. And so for that reason, if you like to get in and out of the kitchen as quickly as I do, you will probably want to choose an instant yeast. This is a 1-pound package of yeast, and it will make about 50 loaves of bread. So depending on how many loaves of bread you make at one time and how often you bake, you can gauge how long this package would last you. Now, I go through that about every 2.5 to 3 months. And so the way I store mine is I pour all of this into this container and I just bury a measuring spoon down in there so that each time I make bread, I don't have to get out all the different spoons and wash them and put them away. But I put this in the refrigerator in the door where I keep all my condiments, and that's just where I reach in and grab it out every time I need to make bread. Now, if you are not going to go through an amount like this in about 4 to 6 months time, then you would want to put it in a smaller container, a smaller amount in a smaller container, and put the rest of this into maybe a freezer heavyweight bag, storage bag that you could put into the freezer. And that way it could store probably as long as a couple of years. I've even heard of people using this yeast up to 5 years past the expiration date. And all yeast packages will have an expiration somewhere on them. But it does need to be stored in the refrigerator or the freezer once it has been opened. Still in its unopened state, you can keep it on the shelf or put it directly into the freezer. But once it's opened, you do need to refrigerate or freeze it. Now, when you're ready to take it out and use for your bread, because all of your other ingredients are going to be probably warm, because if you have fresh flour and hot water, I usually don't let my yeast warm up and come back up to temperature. I usually just go ahead and put it in there and it does just fine. But if you're concerned about using your yeast from the freezer, you might want to take it out and scoop a little bit onto a plate or in a bowl so that it can kind of come up to room temperature.